So recently there seems to be some sort of debate by butthurt bodybuilders that bodybuilding classifies as functional training. AKA they're claiming that bodybuilding is functional. And honestly, these idiots are getting away with it because people don't know what functional training really is. If you don't know who I am, my name is Rios. I have a Bachelor of Science in Exercise Science, and because I'm here to make fitness great again, I'll be going over why bodybuilding is not functional. Before I get started with the video, I'm excited to announce that I just started doing one-on-one coaching. With one-on-one coaching, not only do you get direct access to me, but you get custom workout and nutrition plans to help you reach your goals, whether it's an aesthetic goal or an athletic performance goal. I'll leave a link in the description where you can fill out a form and we can see if we're a good fit. But if one-on-one coaching isn't your thing, be sure to check out my 90-day aesthetic body blueprint, or if you're more focused on athletic performance, check out my 120-day peak athleticism package. All of these will be in the description. Before I get into why bodybuilding isn't functional, you need to understand what functional training really is. There are a ton of different definitions of what functional training or a functional exercise is, which makes sense because the word functional is pretty subjective. But there are a couple definitions I really like. The first most basic definition is from WebMD, which says that functional training is a type of exercise that looks like movements you can make in your daily life, and it can be helpful for athletic performance, injury prevention, and other everyday fitness tasks. This is a pretty solid definition, but it is pretty broad. I mean, you can pretty much say anything fits into this to some degree, which is why I really like this more specific definition from the National Strength and Conditioning Association. They first get into what functional means, which makes sense because you need to know what the word functional means because it's in functional exercise and functional training. They state that the term functional is used with reference to exercises that are considered more specific to a performance of a task or that possess greater transferability to performance of sports skills. And that although the functionality of an exercise is often based on subjective judgment, exercises are considered to be more functional or to possess greater transferability when the core muscles are involved in conjunction with the actions of the upper or lower extremities. So this exercise definitely gives you a better idea of what functional training is. But there is one more definition that I really like from the Institute of Human Performance. When it comes to functional movements, they state that functional movements are movements that have a useful and function-specific purpose in our lives. Emphasis on function specific. And when it comes to functional training, they state that functional training is training that improves functionality at an optimal level with emphasis on the word optimal. And I'll get into greater detail on that later in this video. So now that you have a better idea of what functional training is, I'll get into why bodybuilding doesn't classify as functional training. And the huge reason why bodybuilding doesn't classify as functional training is that they try and create the most stable environment to train in, which obviously makes it easier for them to target specific muscles, but they end up taking the core and other stabilizers out of exercises. All daily activities and sports skills require you to stabilize your own body. And if you look back at the National Strength and Conditioning Association of functional exercises, taking the core out of exercises will lead to decreased transferability and would make exercises less functional. When you think about daily activities or sports, you're going to be using your core to stabilize the body so you can generate force. And with typical bodybuilding exercises, yeah, you're generating force, but you're taking the core out of the exercise. A very easy example to look at is that many bodybuilders trash on the standing overhead press because core stability is a limiting factor. So they usually offer a seated overhead press. And while the shoulder stabilizers are being used to some degree with a seated overhead press, the trunk stabilizers are not. And when it comes to a more specific choice between the two, the standing is a more functional alternative because in real life and of course in sports skills, you're going to be standing up, so it's more specific. Another example is a machine chest press over a barbell bench press. Because a machine chest press has a fixed range of motion, you're not using your shoulder stabilizers in the exercise. While with any sort of bench press variation, you're going to be using the shoulder stabilizers to obviously stabilize your arm. And again, the use of free weights would be considered more functional because it's more specific to daily activities. When in real life or in sports, do you have a fixed range of motion? And when it comes to functional movements, bodybuilders will usually do these really strange movements to try and emphasize specific muscles, and they'll usually grab a bench or grab a pole to brace against. And just by looking at this exercise, you can tell that this crap isn't functional. So an easy way to explain why bodybuilding isn't functional is because it takes the core and stabilizers out of exercises, which is needed for all daily activities and sports. So hearing that, you may be thinking bodybuilding isn't functional, and it's pretty obvious that it's not. But believe it or not, bodybuilders are such hardcore copers that they make the stupidest response videos as to why bodybuilding is functional. And I'll be taking a look at a couple of the worst ones I've seen.
Functional strength is not a thing. This myth has been spreading forever, but it literally makes no sense. Functional for what? What is the function here? See, if the function of my lifting is to put on muscle mass, then I'm going to do very stable movements correctly. That is functional for my goal. If your function is getting good at barbell bench press, then barbell bench press. Hypertrophy is my function.
This one has to be the worst counter argument I've ever seen. So essentially this dude was like, bodybuilding isn't functional, so I'll make up my own definition as to what functional training is. It kind of reminds me of what certain people do when they're losing an argument.
My choice! My choice!
You can't just make up your own definition of functional training because bodybuilding doesn't apply. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's pretty obvious that building muscle is not considered functional because that's not a task or an activity. And these stupid ass machines this dude uses doesn't improve function at an optimal level.
Problem with all these idiot bodybuilders who train for hypertrophy is that it's not functional. These guys might look impressive in the mirror, but those muscles can't actually do anything. You might have heard some goofy functional training influencer say something like that before, but for the most part, they're just yapping about nothing. Now, I know this might be a hard concept for some of these guys to grasp, but muscle mass is functional in and of itself. The reason the body adds that new tissue in response to training is to create a stronger, more capable muscle. The purpose of hypertrophy literally is strength. So even if aesthetics are your main focus, you're still training for strength by default, and in turn, that strength makes you more functional. Now, will a bodybuilding style program make you as functional at boxing or basketball or bowling compared to someone who trains specifically for those activities? No, but if that's not your goal, then who gives a f? The bottom line though is that if you're training every major muscle group of the body through all the basic movement patterns, squats, hip hinges, overhead presses, horizontal presses, vertical pulls, rows, etc., and you're getting progressively stronger at those movements over time, which you have to do in order to gain the muscle you're after, that absolutely is functional by any non-brain dead definition.
First of all, I find it hilarious how when it's convenient, bodybuilders act like they train movements and they don't train muscles. I mean, this is the same dude that uses lifting straps on a leg extension, and hate to break it to you, buddy, but knee extension is not a foundational human movement. I discussed this in greater detail in my bodybuilder versus athlete video, but athletes train movements and bodybuilders train muscles, but this dude just switches it up all of a sudden because it's convenient for him. His argument essentially comes down to the point that building muscle and putting on size makes bodybuilding functional, aka doing exercise in itself is functional. And this goes back to one of the definitions I mentioned earlier, that functional training improves function at an optimal level, not just any sort of level, because you can pretty much do anything and it will improve your function. For example, if I had some sort of lazy couch potato do leg curls and leg extensions, would it improve his ability to walk and sprint? Yeah, probably. I mean, any exercise can make someone better at anything pretty much. But does that mean that machines like leg curls and leg extensions are functional? No. Like I said before, any exercise will improve your ability to do pretty much anything, but that doesn't mean that it's functional. And again, it's because it doesn't improve function at an optimal level.
Favorite exercises because it's easy, but in my opinion, the hardest exercises are the ones that you benefit the most from. The leg extension and the leg curl are terrible exercises because they're not functional at all.
The leg extension and leg curl are training some of the main functions of the quads and the hamstring. I'd say that's pretty functional.
Again, here's another example of some idiot making up their own definition of the word functional training because they know that bodybuilding isn't functional, so they have to change the definition. First of all, leg curls and leg extensions are not realistic movements. I've discussed this a whole bunch of times. Leg curls and leg extensions are open chain leg exercises when most leg movements in real life are closed chain, and they use the leg muscles in isolation when in reality the leg muscles typically work together. But going back to the National Strength and Conditioning Association's definition of functional exercise, leg curls and leg extensions wouldn't classify as a functional exercise because they take the core out of the movement, because obviously you're sitting on your ass like a lazy fuck. Again, another terrible argument from this dumbass. Are most of the movements this guy does in this video functional? Yeah, I would say they are. But again, they lack the core and stability demand that's needed for daily activities and sports skills. So again, would all these exercises improve this guy's ability to do stuff outside the gym to some degree? Yes. Does it classify as functional training though? No, because it's not optimal for improving athleticism and functionality. It takes a different kind of idiot to make a video claiming that bodybuilding is functional and then only using clips of you using machines. Blows my mind. Bodybuilding is not functional, and they shouldn't try and make it seem like it is. Bodybuilders are such soy boys that they're folding to the new narrative that functional training is cool. And this is because training like an athlete and improving functionality is becoming more popular, and I would have to say my brother Mario and I are a big reason as to why this is. When it comes to not looking like an idiot, it would be way smarter for bodybuilders to adopt the mindset of bodybuilding isn't functional, but that's okay because that's not the point of it. I mean, if they just did this, people would probably respect their opinion, but they end up looking like idiots trying so hard to claim that bodybuilding is functional. This is kind of like an esports person trying to claim they're an athlete. People would obviously laugh at them because it takes no athleticism to play freaking video games. But if these esports dudes took a different approach and were like, hey, we're not athletes, we know we're not athletes, but just like athletes, we compete at the highest level, so you should respect us, they're more likely to get your respect. The same thing applies to bodybuilders. But if bodybuilders had some balls and were like, hey, we know bodybuilding isn't functional, we're not trying to make it functional, but bodybuilding is still a great way to train and a great way to put on some mass, people would actually respect it. But since these dudes have very low IQs, they offer the option to make themselves look stupid by trying to claim that bodybuilding is functional. When it comes to how a bodybuilder and how an athlete trains, I took a deep look as to the differences between the two.